Harmony Williams, and this is Life Changing Trips. Sometimes it's hard to see the freedom and the beauty that lives behind the weight of everything we carry. But I believe that life is so amazing, and I can't waste another moment. I'm so excited to be here with you for another transformational conversation about experiences and the latest research on plant medicine, meditation, breath work, and other unconventional modalities, and how they are being used for mental health and expansion. I hope by listening that you will find ways to integrate your peak experiences and epiphanies to open up new levels of possibilities, ingenuity, and fulfillment in business, and deeper, authentic connection and passion in your relationships, and a feeling of purpose, of living fully alive. Welcome. Today, I want to introduce you to Melanie Henry. She is a certified cannabis educator, certified Reiki master, and she teaches the science behind the cannabis medicine. She's so knowledgeable, and she has such a fun personality and way of teaching and telling the stories. You will get to hear her story about the car accident she was in and how her husband actually up and moved to Oregon so that she could legally take the medicine that was the only thing that was helping her to walk and keep her out of pain. She has some other super fun stories too about doing a topical thing for tonsil stones for one of her sons and how the doctor was so impressed with how well it was healing. All kinds of nerdy science and fun stories in this episode. Okay, and we will link here in the show notes. She has done some legwork and is very passionate about making sure the cannabis that you get is pure, that the company has their COAs, their Certificate of Analysis, I think it stands for. And the reason why that is so important, we actually, here in the last several years, have had poisonings. So the cannabis plant is actually this really cool, it pulls all the toxins out of the soil, which is really great for cleansing the soil. But then if the cannabis that you're using has not been processed correctly, then you will be getting those toxins in your cannabis or your medicine. So the poisonings were actually because the companies didn't process it correctly, and it had arsenic from the soil. So please be careful where you get your medicine from. Make sure you know the laws in your state. And I always love supporting real people that I know that are trying to do good and have good hearts. So click on the link in the comments for the company that has full spectrum cannabinoids and use that affiliate code. Okay. And then remember, you can follow me on social media, and in my bio or in the show notes, there's my link tree, and that has links to everything I'm doing. So it will show you if you want to do a private or a group hike on our life-changing trips community chat. We will be posting about our next get-together. Okay, here's Melanie, and we have Heidi here with us today. So it's just a fun conversation I'm glad you get to join us for. Hi, welcome. This is Harmony, and I'm here with Heidi. Hi. And we are going to interview and just have a conversation with Melanie today. Melanie is a certified cannabis educator. She told me all the things, and it's amazing, but I'm going to let her explain a little bit more about what you do.
I am a certified cannabis educator, working with clients as a certified educator, health coach, and cannabis coach. I got into this kind of in the most backwards way you possibly could. I grew up in a very LDS community. I did the things that did not work well for me. I struggled a lot with being very in tune to the world, being very empathetic. I'm an empath. That's not necessarily accepted in a lot of communities, especially, in the 70s. That was not what we thought we want our families to be. So I struggled throughout high school. I got married. That was a horrible thing. 23 years ago this month, I was in a traumatic car accident. I was just sitting at a stop sign. I had left my daughter with a babysitter. My 5-month-old son was in the back seat. I was stretched out with my right leg, really pushed hard against the brake, and my shoulder pushed against the steering wheel. I was stretching, and a woman who was inebriated and reading slammed into the back of me, and that moment forever changed my life.
Wow.
I'm a seeker. I've always been seeking answers, and I just never felt like I fit in this world I came into. And so I had been asking a lot of questions. My husband at the time worked out of town all the time, so it was just me and my daughter a lot. And I was trying to figure out my life, and then the universe smacked me real hard. Literally, yeah. I separated your collarbone is actually a joint.
Oh.
I almost completely separated it from the joint, the trauma. My hip has all kinds of issues, and I broke my back.
Wow.
That we didn't know of. It took, then over the span of the next 2 years, doctors, chiropractors, having doctors look at me and tell me, you have the spine of a 90-year-old person. We don't know what to do with you. You're 27.
Wow.
And with that, the medical community goes, well, we'll give you drugs. They had me on oxy. I took 13 at the highlight of my
Drug career.
Yes, of all of this, I was on 13 medications.
Wow.
And oxys, methadone. I mean, they had me on something for everything. And then I was introduced, I was really drawn to this health and wellness expo in the area, and I met some of these amazing healers, and I got introduced to Reiki. And I was like, okay, this is my jam. I can do this. So I started on that journey, and I got certified, and it really allowed me to really get in tune with my body, because what I had learned is from trauma, we can separate ourselves from our body. We can live outside. Well, I was not connected to my body at all. My body was just screaming in agony, and I was like putting my hands over my eyes, just trying not to see it all.
Yeah.
Well, then when you have injuries like this, you get into physical therapy, and they make you figure out what's going on with your body. It did not take long, and my husband and I separated. And it took a couple of years. I had 3 surgeries in a year and a half. Every 6 months, I had a back surgery. Because when they would remove the disc to stabilize, there's like this 5% of people who grow new disc tissue.
Oh, wow.
Well, I did that. And
I didn't know that was a thing.
I didn't either. And so the last surgery, I've had 4 surgeries, was an H cage through my spine. And then there are 4 screws, the L5, S1, stabilizing me. But the pain didn't stop. That didn't end. So I started working with these women. They were amazing. They had a salon and wellness center. I went to work with them. I started learning about herbs, and then we did energy work. We did women's meditation, and it was great. And that was going really well. But there was still something missing. Well, as life changes, I decided I wanted to go to school. So I moved to Twin Falls from Idaho Falls. And I went to school to be a drug and alcohol counselor. In the meantime, I met my husband. We were both at school. We're both 38 years old, going to college, and we meet in college. I was having some issues, but I was trying to be tough. I don't know. I think it's something bred in us as women. I was just going to suck it up because it's what I had to do. Well, it just progressively, the pain was getting worse, and I was having more bouts, and I had to have my gallbladder removed, and things were just not going well. And I graduated, and I had a super bad flare-up that I was like, okay, I've got to go to the doctor. The neurologist told me, this is about 10 years ago, that I wouldn't walk in a year.
Oh.
That there was so much pressure involved in my spinal canal that for them to surgically intervene would most likely get a 98% chance of being paralyzed. Oh. So they're like, we can give you drugs. Here's more drugs, because we always have drugs. Yeah. And then they're like, and we'll give you a prescription for a wheelchair. Oh. Well, when I was a kid, I was an athlete. I played basketball, and I just cried. Yeah. And then right before I left, this sweet woman, who I don't even remember her name, I saw her once, she put her hand on my leg, and she goes, there are options in other places that I can't discuss with you, but I hope you find what you need. The universe just spoke through her in that moment. And I went home, and my husband has been using cannabis since he was like 12. I had used some for pain, but I was going to school. I was doing practicum. You can't be sitting in drug and alcohol counseling while you're going home smoking your weed because your back hurts. I couldn't. I still had this conflict within me. So I come home, and I was like, Eric, this is what the doctor said. And he was working nights at the time, so I woke him up, and this sweet man that I am married to, he's like, well, okay. So we moved to Oregon. And I was like, well, but you just don't get up and leave your life.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we have two options. You're in a wheelchair and you're miserable and you hate your life, or we give it our best shot. What's the worst thing that can happen? And I am panicking.
Aww.
He literally like pats me and is like, oh, you should call my mom. You'll be fine. He goes to work. Well, his mother they lived like gypsies kind of throughout their life. Mm-hmm. He went to 22 schools.
Wow.
So to him, it was like,
no big
well,
deal.
it's Wednesday. I had moved from my hometown to this town to put myself through school. It was like huge for me. I'm like, what do you mean? And I still had, at the time, my daughter wasn't really speaking to us, and she was going through a really hard time, and she was having a baby, and I had a son still in school, and I was terrified because we still had some custody between him. And in Idaho, had I got arrested for using, I would have gotten charged, it's like a 25 years because I am a certified drug and alcohol counselor. I should know better.
Wow.
So it's like, I was scared.
Yeah, this is serious.
This is serious. This could go to jail.
Life.
And I know, I
either way, my life is ruined.
Long in jail. Yes,
Right.
yes. I could do a lot of hard things. That wasn't one. So within 3 weeks, we talked to our landlords, who happened to be getting divorced, and she moved into her house and was super happy to break our lease. Awesome. Eric has a niece that lived in Bend, Oregon. She's like, sure, come stay with us. We had been planning this vacation, so we had this savings put together for this vacation. So then we had to tell my son, who knew nothing about that I had ever smoked anything, because he's my baby. I'm trying to protect him.
How old is he at this time?
He's about 14 at this time, but a very compassionate, kind kid. And when I first told him, he was a little angry. That's how he handles new things a little. He's like, just leave me alone.
Well, and we've taught him our whole lives.
We have. And then we broke away from these rules, and now there are no rules, and now this crazy hippie's in our life, and my kid's like, oh, great, now we're going to move to Oregon and do drugs. Great. But I really felt like at this point, if I'm going to do this, I'm not doing it underground.
Right.
With being a drug and alcohol counselor, I really got over that. In our religion, there's a lot of, it doesn't matter if the elephant shits in the room, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So
I never got that lesson.
We just aren't going to talk about all the things. It's all a secret. And I was like, I'm ending that. It was really important for me to end that with my kids. But, there's still that little girl fear of telling your parents, what are they going to do? Nothing. But so I invited Eric's parents to our house and my parents to our house ahead of time. And my brother came also. And I was like, we're just going to, before my son's birthday, I'm going to just be like, this is what's happening. You should be informed. Eric's amped up. He's ready to fight someone. And so we're sitting at a table. And my mom could be very, very religious, very stuck in, things were very black and white for her. And so I'm just I'm thinking, if I have my mother-in-law, they don't know each other very well. We've only been married a year. It can't be that bad. So I let Eric just I'm like, okay. Eric's like, well, we just want to tell you. And I was like, okay. I went to the doctor. I've been in severe pain for months. It's getting to the point to where I was able to do about 2,500 steps in a day before I literally couldn't do it anymore. I was in so much pain. We have tried this medicine that I can't get here, and I'm just waiting for the room to explode. And I was like, I've tried it, and it's making a big difference, but I can't do it here. So I've been using cannabis, and my mom's eyes are like saucers. Just saucers. And my mother-in-law is sitting there with her little hands together, just with the most compassion and love that, you just wish someone loved you that much. And I explained to them, we've made a decision, and here's what we're going to do, because we've decided to give me my best shot. Otherwise, I don't know how long I'm going to be okay here. And my parents had seen me go through enough, and my mother-in-law pops up and says, oh my gosh, honey, we love you so much. How can we help you?
Aww.
And you could see my mom's eyes just change. It was like, oh, we can accept it. Can
that's
be
an
okay.
option. This is okay.
I really don't know that she thought
put her
that
down and shame her and judge her.
And then, bless her heart, it just was who she was. She didn't mean ill of it.
Right.
And then everyone's like, so what's going to go on? And they're asking questions. And and then Eric's about ready to implode because he's all amped up for a fight. And everyone's like, oh, we love you. And he's like, I don't know how to handle this. So we moved. Within 3 weeks, we moved. He got a job. Once we got there are these compassion programs in Oregon where you can go into a clinic. They have a doctor. They got my medical records. I sat in the office for like an hour because they did at that time have to, for medical, they had to prove that you had an issue. Well, the hospital sends them my MRIs. They immediately approve me. But you had to wait till you had your card to be able to go to a dispensary there. So they hooked me up with people who like gifted me tincture. They gifted me like 2 ounces of flour and were like, here, this will get you started. Let us know how we can help you.
Wow.
And in that instant, it was like black and white. I went from you were going to go to jail to how can we help you with this medicine?
Yeah.
And so then I started using, and immediately within the first couple of years, I lost about 60 pounds. I started feeling better. My son come home one day, and he was, in this community, they all grow. At school, they had a guy come in and talk about cannabis, and the kids negatively,
Oh, okay.
like a dare kind of thing.
Okay.
The kids booed him off stage, and the principal asked him to leave.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
I was just like, it was like living in Oz. I got to really meet people who, and this is where this all come in is, these stories. I was saying earlier when we were talking, these stories are so important that we talk about this because most of us are living in our basements feeling like, oh, we're going to be in trouble. We've done something horrible. But the reality is the number one killer in the United States is in one way or another linked to stress.
Right.
Whether it's heart disease, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's drug abuse, everything can be led back to stress.
Yeah.
Well, what's the one thing that we can do that's helpful to stress? Well, cannabis is amazing for stress. It helps regulate your endocannabinoid system, which regulates widespread homeostasis without your body. So how can the thing that's killing us the most, and there's this plant that, using their words, God created, how can this be bad? And to be in this community where it was just embraced.
Yeah. The thing we don't see is you can go overboard on anything, right?
Absolutely.
You can get out of control. I mean, any type of substance or food or exercise or shopping or alcohol or whatever it is, if you have some underlying root problem and you need to mask it, or you can get out of balance, you can do whatever you can to hide that root problem, and the shopping or the overeating of food or the alcohol or the drug or whatever that is not the problem.
Absolutely.
It's let's help people with that underlying issue. Yours was physical. A lot of people, like you were saying, it's the stress, it's the trauma, it's whatever, the everyday life that they're not dealing with, and then we're just covering it up, where we can use it as a tool. People accept that some people need antidepressants, and that's okay. Let's use it as a tool. Let's use it as something to help them get through this. Maybe we can combine something with it too, and not just mask with antidepressants and make you feel numb, like things can do, just numb you out. But let's help you. Let's get to the underlying issues and solve this problem. So I don't even want to shame anyone who's using this to mask right now. Like, if they're suicidal, if they need it for whatever reason is, and they're numbing with that, I mean, I'm kind of glad they're here and not dead, I guess.
Exactly.
And why don't we get them some help?
And the funny thing about cannabis is for most of us, it's not so much as a numbing as it allows us to connect with ourselves.
Oh.
It allows us to have a voice.
Yeah.
If I was, like I said, I was raised in a very religious community and felt very oppressed, and I couldn't say the things. And even now, if I am in conflict, sometimes I can just take a minute. Okay, I need to have some medicine because I need to get out of all of the what if fear. Right. And I need to focus down so that I can listen to what's happening inside of me so that I can put it into words, because it calms that anxiety. There are, and don't get me wrong, there are people who still can't abuse cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot smoke 14 grams of wax a day and tell me you're okay.
Right.
So
you're
with
numbing
everything.
something.
Yeah, yes. And within my degree, there's a gentleman named Gabor Mate. He works with some of the most on the fringe addicts who have AIDS, and I mean, he just is doing amazing work. And he always, something that really impressed upon me was, we should never ask someone why the addiction. we should always be asking, where's the pain? Because addiction comes out of pain.
Right.
The pain causes stress. Stress kills us. So it's this, like I said, coming from a drug and alcohol background where it's all demonized, but the blessing that I got from that I didn't realize is I got to take pharmacology of psychoactive drugs. I got to sit with an instructor and be like, okay, here's your brain. Here's how it's supposed to work. Okay, if we add this drug, this is might what happened. And this is what. And so I really got to understand how maybe not everything she would have liked us to learn, but how our brains and bodies are built to work together. And then at one point in our in this class, one of our assignments was, okay, because legalization, this is like 2012. So legalization is happening in Oregon. They're about ready to go recreational like 2 years later, just after we moved. That's a whole nother story. Being in a state once they go recreational it was an experience.
Oh man.
But so there was a real conversation being had, yet even the drug and alcohol community was like, okay, you're pretty cute, but we need to have the conversation, but we're not for it. So we had to do our research, pro or con, medical or not, recreational or not. Again, so then I'm doing all this research. I have this sweet husband who I have all these questions because I didn't know. People who did drugs went to jail. They were just bad. So I had all these questions. So I really got this beautiful experience of getting to learn from his point of view. So then when we go to present, there's very few people in the class who are like pro. And I am like, do you know how many people use this? Do you know statistics? It is one of the few drugs that doesn't matter what sex you are, doesn't matter what economic circumstances you come from. Almost the percentage of use is almost equal. Really? And they're finding more women in their 40s and plus are discovering cannabis for medical reasons.
Yeah.
But it's not just a black person. It's not a Hispanic thing. We were told that for years. If you reefer madness.
Right. We can go into a whole other thing about why they're the ones that are in the jails and that's the prisons,
like the history of this
privilege
is so important.
Yeah. There's a lot.
And so I think it's for me how I kind of my own healing and meeting people and going to these different events and really finding out that people were using this as healing and it was working for me. And so then I started having these conversations with my family. And I would, at first, when I would say it to my dad, he would be like, that's how I could get dad off the phone? Just speak of cannabis. He was okay with it, but he was like, well, I think I better be going now. But I just kept standing in my truth. I would post things on Facebook, like these memes of where we've got children who are having certain type of epileptic seizures. It's amazing for. Yet we're going to give them Vicodin and Klonopins and antipsychotics because we don't want them to have THC.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but you have cannabinoid receptors. This is something that we come with. We come with cannabinoids. Why is it so horrible?
Right. Yeah. They're in mother's milk.
Yes,
right?
It's one of the magic of breast milk, So I think that's why it's so important, because now I have friends of my parents from their church who are in their 70s who have messaged me, oh, honey, so I found out I have arthritis really bad, or I have gout, or, well, I was wondering what you could tell me, and family members apologizing to my husband, like, we treated you horrible. We thought you were just a stupid pothead. He's a head engineer for a cannabis company now.
Wow. Yeah.
He's a brilliant human who has a lot of anxiety. Used it to manage his place in the world.
Right. And who says that's worse than these anxiety drugs?
Exactly. We're putting kids on Ritalin every day, and that's okay.
Right.
I mean, if you've ever taken Ritalin, it's probably not okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, because basically some of that is speed.
Right.
And when you get into it can stunt their growth. It can, all of these things. And so I'm not advocating that children need to just widespread use it. But if you have a child who has a medical condition, you should not have to. There's a term for us, and we were considered cannabis refugees when we moved.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
We live in America, right? in the United States, a law that was passed to absolutely persecute people, changed medicine forever because we wanted to oppress certain groups, makes it that in 2014, I had to leave, and I still would have, if I've lived in Idaho, I still would have had to leave my home state to be able to access medicine that has absolutely saved my life.
Yeah. But you could have drunk yourself to like nothing if you wanted to. You could drink.
Absolutely.
And mask that if you would like.
I could have done all they would have given me all the methadone and OxyContin I could have handled, benzodiazepines. All of that was perfectly fine. Right, But, you know, my little eighth of cannabis that helps me more than anything, that wasn't okay.
Oh, I'm curious. Why maybe did you lose weight? You said you lost 60 pounds.
Partly getting the toxins out of my system. I wasn't continually poisoning myself. And I was
with the drugs,
with the medications. It was giving me relief. For the first time, I was able to really get around. I was able to walk. And then once we moved here, I've had a whole second layer of healing. I found a chiropractor here who decompressed my spine. Awesome. For the first time in 20 years, my legs don't hurt all the time. And I've lost another 75 pounds. Nice. And I've gotten healthy. And then it was really a reinforcement to, okay, every time I have these healing, you know, I make this progress and then something kind of steps back. And every time it's cannabis that helps me through. Wow. It's cannabis that helps me manage. I don't take antidepressants. I don't take anxiety meds. I have a bit of anxiety and I can manage that on my own. I can titrate on myself. I know what I need. I don't have to be excessive about it, but having this knowledge, and it helps other people be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to turn in, you know, for my dad being around us all the time. He's been around me while I've used and I'm desensitizing them, but he also realizes that all the things he was told, I don't go and turn into a crazy person.
I was just going to say, you're still you.
Yeah.
He's probably like, wait, what?
She's
still the same.
I'm a little more relaxed. Exactly. Yeah. I have a little bit, I think I'm funnier.
She laughs a little easier.
Yeah, a little more talkative, but.
And so when my son, when he really was like, okay, this is a thing, he came home one day and he goes, I'm so glad we moved here. And I was like, are you? And he goes, you sing in the kitchen again.
Aww.
And to have your
like all together.
Yes. I mean, and to me it was this affirmation that you're doing the right thing. Yeah. But I had to work long and hard to figure out, because you go to the dispensary, and unfortunately, even if you are in a state that had, like Utah's medical, you just go to the dispensary and they're still like, oh, this will get you messed up. Well, that's adorable. However, I had to learn what terpenes were. How do they affect the medicine? Yeah. You know, what does this percentage mean?
Yeah. I have no idea.
You know, how is that going to affect me? For me, I had to learn the hard way that sativas aren't necessarily, when I'm anxious, something I should do, because then I want to fight you. I just want to argue. I just feel combative a little. Or not in a violent way, or I want to like deep scrub the floor. Like my OCD kicks in and I'm like, I can see that lint right there and it must die. So, but it took me a long, there was no one doing what coaching. Yeah. There was no education. Yeah. You know, the first time I heard endocannabinoid system, I was like, oh, they're making up words. I had taken a Nat and Fizz. Right. No one had ever told me that you have an endocannabinoid system. Even going through school, it took me 10 years to learn, for somebody to finally tell me, I had to read it in a book, why you couldn't overdose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Why is that?
Exactly. You could read and they'll just tell you, no, you can't, you can't. Well, you have CB1 and CB2 receptors. They are what work with the cannabis, the cannabinoids. Well, they don't exist within your brainstem. They're very sparse there. So there's no way for it to overtake your autonomic nerve system. Your breathing, your respiration, your heart rate are not affected. Well, where the opioid receptors are, where we put opioids, they are very prominent within our autonomic nervous system. Yeah. So a little too much and it no longer remembers what its job is. Cannabis doesn't have that effect because those receptors aren't there. So it is so much safer. You know, like you say, normalizing it. Why can't, you know, my joint or my, you know, dryer vaporizer be okay, but your 4 glasses of wine after dinner are?
Yeah.
You know, it's changing the conversation, and I think it's important that we talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're all educated, smart women who are great in the world. We don't fit this.
Exactly. But the more we learn about it and being able to be more intentional about it. And
Absolutely.
I mean, I have been learning some of this, the endocannabinoids. We have more endocannabinoid receptors than we do nerve endings.
Yes.
I learned that. Is
wow.
that true? Yeah.
Every skin cell that we have has, so every type, there are different types of skin cell. Every types of our skin cell have endocannabinoid receptors. Our organs are within our brain, within our nervous system. It's literally everywhere. For a long time, they were considered for medicine. They thought they were orphan receptors. Our body had made these beautiful receptors, and they had no purpose. Well, then come, like, I think it was 1980s, late 80s, they did some testing and did some reverse antigens, and they're like, oh my goodness, these receptors, when you add THC and CBD in, they wake up. My daughter and I, she loves Titanic. It's been 84 years. We're like right at 84 years since our doctors have been able to prescribe. And what's interesting is that when it went illegal, the American Medical Association fought because they couldn't necessarily explain to you why this medicine worked, but it worked on a broad array of things. It didn't show signs of addiction. They could give it to people when they were like, well, we don't really know what's wrong, but try this.
Right.
Yeah.
And they wrote a letter, the head attorney, who is also a doctor, wrote a letter to Congress at the time, and he's like, isn't it funny, you're saying all these things are happening, but you don't have the school board in here. And when I reach out to them, the National School Board Association, they're saying, well, we aren't looking into that because it's not a problem.
Right.
The prison system, you're saying that everybody's going to prison. Well, when we talk to the prison system, they aren't, you're not allowing any of these people to be here. And he said something really poignant that, we can't be held responsible, and you don't know what this decision will do in the future, how it's going to affect medicine. 84 years later, autism is an all-time high. Autoimmune disorders are at an all-time high.
Depression,
Anxiety. Our endocannabinoid systems are hugely dysregulated. And at the, long before this, at the time of the Constitution, all of those members who signed the Constitution, it was law that you had to grow hemp.
Really?
It was law.
Wow.
Because it was good for the environment. It's a bio accumulator. It'll pull toxins out of this, out of the ground. And so I think, when we really start having these conversations and we learn, we quickly find out either it really super pisses you off. It did me. It just makes me angry that we've taken something that is about healthcare and wellness, and we talk about, we want to preserve life. But how are we doing that if we're demonizing something that has such a broad availability for people and works in ways that we don't? And even the Mayo Clinic's coming out with research that IBS, fibromyalgia, and migraines are a trifecta that is indicated in autoimmune deficiency. Almost all autoimmune disorders have some link to endocannabinoid deficiencies. And people are suffering,
Right.
for no reason, because we don't want them to have a plant.
Craziness. Yes.
It is all cannabis. I don't care if
There's
it's
100 and
CBD.
how many cannabinoids?
There's
Over 100.
218, I think, that they...
Over
but
200.
There's so many.
Yeah.
But it's all cannabis.
Yeah.
So when I talk about cannabis, I'm not, unless I'm being specific,
Right.
it's all the same thing. And we need to really normalize that. It's cannabis. It's, if you want to call it hemp, great. It's all the same plant. It's like calling an apple and being like, well, no, this is a gala.
Oh.
It's still an apple.
Still an apple. Right.
So it comes in many degrees. So the plant itself is considered a bioaccumulator. What that means is when you put that plant in the ground, whatever's in the ground, it's going to suck up into it as whatever, toxins, heavy metals, pesticides, anything that's in the ground, fungus. So it is important that, like you said, there's a thing called a COA. And it is a certificate of authenticity. No. COA. The A stands. Anyway, it's a certificate that comes with, it's testing. So what happens is, so anyone can grow. They grow this plant. Well, then you have to take that parts of the plant and have it tested. And most states, like here, they test for heavy metals and pesticides. And so it's important you know where your things come from.
Right.
Because
so they distill it down, and then if after they've done the whole process and it's ready to go to you, they find out there's still toxins in it or they haven't done it well. I think one of the things...
So it should be, a good COA should be on the flower. There should be a COA then for the next product because you're changing it.
All the way
Anytime
along the way.
you've altered the product, it has to have a new COA.
Right.
Even your flower. You can go to your pharmacy or dispensary and you can ask them for the COA. And they have
That's
to
what I
give
was
it to
going
you.
to ask. Are dispensaries required to follow those?
Absolutely,
COA?
because it is it's a health and safety issue. If there's 153 times the pesticide in your vape pen, that's why black market is so dangerous.
Right.
Really, it's
yeah, that's
not,
what I was saying. Like, black market's not worth it.
It can be, and
even
a lot
getting
of
like
people,
hemp off Amazon that's not whatever, it's the cheapest, but if they haven't distilled it properly and then tested it, and there's not enough funding right now that they're actually going and checking all these places. So it's out there. There was
they like Oregon's really, they've got a pretty tight law
Oregon
on there.
probably, yeah.
have the
Colorado's
best
pretty good. Oh, they do. It's like living in Oz. Coming here has been like, they're finally starting to get there. But when we first were here, I was like, what?
Yeah, when I first experienced it in Oregon, I was like, this is so different.
So, but that was like
So much
my
better.
like breakthrough. So then I kind of like, Eric says I got to grow up in Oz. And I was like, well, you raised me spoiled and I don't know. But sometimes also the other danger with buying things like on Amazon is it may say it has this percentage of, say, CBD. Well, they also do dirty little things like they can even take distillate, whether it's clean or dirty, spray the plant down. So you could have like 2% CBD in the plant. They've sprayed it with distillate that they've made to up the numbers.
I see.
So, I mean, there are things that, I mean, the black market has been our only, for a long time, was our only source.
Yeah.
But there's also really good, and I think as consumers, it's a way that, you know, people ask me a lot of times, you know, well, what can we do to change the conversation? Be informed. Yeah. Buy from companies who are doing good things. You know, we all stand on the backs of people who went to jail before us and ruined their lives to have the conversation that we're having. So it's also, you know, equity is important, you know, investing in women, investing in minority companies, investing in, look at companies' practices. Are they giving back? There's places like the Last Prisoner Project. Yeah. You know, are they contributing to the bigger conversation? Because we aren't there yet.
Yeah.
We aren't federally legal yet.
Right.
So, you know, and voting, you know, I know we all feel like our vote doesn't count, but if we don't stand up, somewhere, you know, and having these conversations, being willing to just really invest in ourselves and be okay with it. Mm-hmm. Even though, you know, make friends who are okay with it. Yeah. Because there's more of us out there, and as I talk to people, I do energy work too, and I might have someone on my table and I'll be like, well, you know, what are you going through? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, what, have you tried any, like, maybe even CBD? And probably 8 out of 10 people I've worked with lately have like, well, since you brought it up, or I'll say, well, I also do this, you know, just it's really quick because people want to know. Mm-hmm. They just don't know who to trust.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And it's scary. It's sad that it has to be scary for people to talk about things that are changing their life, that
Absolutely.
are helping, that have a lot of, it's sad that it has to be so, like, you have to feel this guilt or shame or hide it, or it has to be a scary thing that you're worried, like you were, that I could go to prison for 25 years for.
Or I'm a bad mom.
Yes,
because I'm engaged with my children, and I, you know, even my kids are 26 and 23 now, and when my daughter came to live with us about 4 years ago in Oregon, when she finally came back, she's like, I wish you would have had this when we were younger. You just are so chill now. Mm-hmm. And I can be more present, and she's not wrong. And so what a gift to give to our kids, to be able to be present without being tuned out of our body or completely destroying our libido or our other relationships. Because the pharmaceuticals there's so many other side effects.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got these courses set up to do, and one of them is Cannabis and Sex. because
Yes, I'm in. I'll come to that class. Let's learn all about it.
We're uptight for 1,000 reasons. We're grocery shopping in our head.
Right. We have the list of all the things we have to do for the kids in the house, and
our experience is about being present.
Right.
And so if we're grocery shopping in our head, we don't have those relationships. But there's lubes. So I have just learned about pot for your twat.
I want some.
So my daughter has used I had endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, so I had horrible cycles, had to have a hysterectomy, so that's good. But my daughter was blessed with some of the same pain. So when we were in Oregon, I would make coconut oil and we would dip her tampons in coconut oil and what is called stoning your ovaries. It's like magic. I was at 14
every day, huh?
taking prescription medication for cramps at 14.
Yeah.
And she's over here just like, I need some more coconut oil.
That's awesome.
But it's a centralized thing. It doesn't necessarily transfer into a high in your brain.
That is going above and beyond on the mom thing, I love it.
I would have loved if someone would have
You knew
had
how
that
it
for
felt
me.
to be her. You're like, I gotta find you an answer.
Absolutely.
That's how I'm with my kids. I need to find an answer. That's why I even got into any of this world. Is I'll tell I tell the whole story on a podcast, but because of my daughter and her sexual abuse that she suffered for years, and then depression and suicidal and anxiety and all of those things. And it's like, okay, the medications aren't working. She's just numb. She's just going through the motions that are not making, or sometimes make her more suicidal. The medications aren't working. Right. The talk therapy is doing a little bit. It's helping a little bit, but not enough.
The talk therapy doesn't change our mindset.
Right.
It doesn't help us move.
There's some great,
and you're stuck in your story.
I know some great therapists that have done amazing things and combine that and integration with other things, herbs, different modalities, all these other things. You combine them together, and then we're seeing miracles.
We're seeing movement
with our kids. That's where we're like, I'm going to do it for my kids, or when you're in that for you, that dire of situation and your pain. So you've got to find an answer. You can't live like that.
Well, and I'm just not the kind of person who's willing to accept, life sucks. You have
Nothing
to deal
you
with
can do.
it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, no, I can. I always, we always have power to make a different choice. We may not feel like it, but for me, cannabis really helped me shift some mindsets, overcome some very limited thinking. And then it was like my son, he had what are called tonsil stones.
Oh, I get those.
Okay, so he had to have his tonsils out. He had been sick. The doctor said that they looked like chewed leather when they took them out. They just get pox, and he was so sick. Well, we get him home, and of course they give you the pills, the pain pills, and we were in Oregon at the time. And when you open a jar of salsa that is molded and there's just like that circle, that's what the back of his throat looked like. Two just like somebody had like rode a rooter to the poor boy's throat, and the medicine was making him nauseous. I said, okay, we're gonna try something. And I had made up a tincture. Well, I just coconut oil with just a lot of CBD and some THC, and I was spraying it in his throat like 4 times a day. It cleared up really fast, and the pills were making him nauseous. And I was like, we don't have to do pills. It's fine. We went to his doctor's appointment 2 weeks in, and he's like, well, let me tell you. He's like, I don't know what you've done, but his throat looks amazing. Wow. He's healed. There's the scar tissue has gone down. There's the inflammation is completely gone. He's healing far better than we expected. Whatever you're doing, Mom, keep it up.
That's awesome.
And I shook the man's hand. I wasn't drugging him.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't a high dose. It was a topical thing. We'd spray it in his throat, but he didn't have to be in this horrible pain.
Right.
And he didn't have to face the issue of, these pills made me feel better. Now maybe I want them more, or any of that. Or it's affected my neurology in some way. It was done. Yeah. And he's been super healthy since. And so I think, we should be allowed as parents to help our kids, to help ourselves, to help our girlfriends, our husbands, our family, anyone, to be able to say, hey, this could help you, and have that be okay.
Right.
I really want to be the voice for people who don't have a voice. I want to be the person who is someone that they can come to and have me put my arms around them and say, you're okay. All right, we'll get through this. Trying to figure it out, because I didn't have anybody to take my hand and say, let's help you. So that's why it's important for me to do the coaching and the education and to offer classes and to have conversation, start a community. I would really like to start a community of people in our area and even widespread and maybe online, that we can get together and share our stories. Share our wins and our okay, I tried this and
what's working,
thought I was going to die. Why?
Right.
Because sometimes we don't know.
Yeah.
We had a gentleman, there's a FICO or RSO is a very, very concentrated form of cannabis.
Okay.
I mean, it is like the dosing that they begin you with, and it's more, it's what we would use if you had cancer or something. I mean, we're talking intense therapy. The first dose is half a grain of rice, and you're still probably going to get set a little sideways.
Wow.
This poor guy, someone gave it to him, and he covered an entire cracker with it, like peanut butter. And he was like, he tried to give it to us at this event, and my husband's like, oh, they tried to kill you. I mean, you won't die. But he was like, that's awful. I don't want it.
Yeah.
But he probably took,
He's like, I'm never doing that again.
10,000 times the dose. So of course he felt terrible. But a lot of people I tried it once and my friends were jerks and I threw up and it was awful. Well, we don't have to live in 15-year-old stoner land anymore.
Right.
We're grown adults.
Yeah.
We should be able to say, oh, okay, start low, go slow, but don't be afraid to go all the way. If you need to have a high dose, your endocannabinoid, mine, we are all so different on a cellular level that of course it doesn't affect everyone, but there are ways to figure out and to educate people so that they have a better handle. So their first dose, they may not feel anything, but that's better than laying on the floor for 5 hours thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Why won't the room stop spinning?
Much better to be underwhelmed than overwhelmed.
Because when you get really scared like that, then we're like, oh, well, that doesn't work. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Or that sent me into a panic attack. Well, yeah, because you took too much and you had anxiety and you were
10,000
in the bad setting and you were all these things.
And that's another important. Set and setting matter.
Your mindset
and the place you were in. If you were in, but I also, if I'm in a crappy mood, I can go sit, even if it's, on my bathroom floor with the door shut, take some deep breaths and change my set and setting.
Yeah.
And then consume. And it really, medical side, they're like, well, what if it's all placebo? Does it matter?
Yeah.
It's all placebo.
Or a lot of people say, well, I microdose, but I don't feel anything. Okay, well, what's changed?
Right. Are you not feeling terrible, but just not feeling great?
Yeah, well, I don't feel high. Well, okay. You don't necessarily, there are these myths that we believe that we've got to, be seeing things or unable to function, but not necessarily. So that's important to me, is just really getting an education out there and supporting people in their journey and standing up and having a voice.
Yeah.
So people don't.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said about community. That's been one of the things that has helped me so much. When you're in a place where around people that you can talk openly and then you can get the answers rather than just like, I tried this and it didn't work and I can't find anything online that speaks to my situation, so I'm just never trying it again. But you can get the answers. You can have people that have had the experience help and coach you through. You can help other people with your experience, and you have that. There's just so much to community. That's what we live for. That's what I'm super passionate about, is relationships and finding people that can support each other.
Cannabis is the communal medicine. It has been for 11,000 years. We found it in Egyptian tombs, in medicine women having cannabis seeds in their pouches.
Wow.
I mean, this is something that we've read in Greece and Rome and all throughout history. Ancient history, we have cultivated and used this medicine as a communal medicine. So it's finally coming full circle. We've gotten so, with all of the illegalities and the repression, we fractured our community.
Yeah.
we fractured this base. We fractured medicine and we fractured our community. Yeah. And we're finally coming into a space where women are coming together and supporting each other with cannabis instead of these archaic beliefs that we're all in competition. Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful thing because it makes us more powerful. Mm-hmm. Together, we're always more powerful than standing alone. Mm-hmm. And when we start showing up as women in a space of power, we change the conversation. Not only for ourselves, but for the women to come and the women that have been who didn't know that they could stand up and go, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. I love that. Our society right now is it's hard to be a parent. And I don't think that's how it always was. You were just on your own island with your kids that they told you had to be a good person and go to heaven, and now you're all alone thinking, what on earth do I do here? I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. And if you have other women in your life that can help you, and cannabis doesn't have to be the answer to everything. I know I've used meditation, and if I can find some tools and some people that have taught me these things, these other people and groups and women, and I can go in my room and meditate for a few minutes, or like you said, go on the bathroom floor and get to a set and setting where I am, whatever those tools are that we share with each other and we support each other, and then I go back and I'm a better mom and I'm there and I'm just like, okay, I'm here.
Well, then you're more likely to show up for yourself.
Oh yeah, and the compassion for ourselves when we're not just guilting and shaming ourselves because we're terrible moms or because we're using the cannabis to be a better mom or whatever that is we just do it. That's I think how most of us were just brought up doing is guilting and shaming ourselves. But if we have that support and then we can have that self-love and that compassion for ourselves, oh my gosh, you just come from a totally different place and your kids see it. Your kids are like,
we're changing their realities because we believe our parenthood and our skills were modeled by our parents. Mm-hmm. So we look at them as this is what's acceptable. Well, if we shift to a more communal way of living and a more being kinder to ourselves, more self-care, that's their normal. Yeah. They don't have to spend the next, 40 years trying to figure out if it's really okay that they are using medicine for self-care because they love having a CBD bath bomb. Mm-hmm. They won't have to feel guilty about that because it's not brought to them in that light.
Yeah. I just think back to when I first found out my son was smoking. He was a junior in high school, I want to say. And I was so uneducated about it. I just thought my whole world was crumbling because my son was smoking pot. And I remember sitting with him and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. And, why didn't you tell me? And do we need to send you to rehab? And I remember shaming the shit out of him, and saying, well, son, if these are the choices you're going to make, you get to deal with the consequences. And, it was
I'm going to take you to jail right now. I'm going to walk you into the police station and let you feel the consequences. I think that's not uncommon, though.
Right.
Right now,
I didn't have the education, nor did I have anyone to turn to like you and say, hey, tell me about this. Inform me a little bit more.
Right. My son's using this and I'm freaking out. And you have this friend that's like, it's going to be okay. Let me educate you on what this is. Yeah. It's not, it's not meth. Right. We're not dealing with cocaine. We're dealing with cannabis. And yes, he might be using it in a little bit of a crazy way because he's a teenager and he's learning.
Looking to have fun and just get high.
Right.
Regardless.
But when you walk it back to alcohol or cannabis, absolutely.
I tell my kids that all the time. Do that if I have to choose. Please go smoke the pot.
Don't do alcohol.
Absolutely.
But even just looking at the dynamic of our relationship at that time and the conflict and he couldn't wait to get out of my house and not have anything to do with us anymore. To now being educated, accepting that, being able to talk about it, and now we're best friends. He calls me every day and we can have a joint together. And anyway, so the education I think is profound and even saves relationships.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm just right there with you going, yes, what if you knew what you knew now? Yeah. And you didn't waste 4 years pushing your kid away.
Being paranoid.
Pushing them, guilting, shaming.
Stuck in that fear mindset. We stop learning because we're just scared.
Yeah.
Everything else, we're in fight or flight at that point. We're just in...
And to that same point though, what if your kid was doing meth? How do we want to treat them? Do we want to just be like shame,
Right.
guilt,
Guilt and shame doesn't
whatever,
work for any of it.
push them away?
Yeah.
Like, no, let's say, hey, it sounds like you're dealing with stuff. How can I help you? You know?
Kids who have families who are using cannabis responsibly are less likely to get into harder drugs because they feel like there's something they can do that isn't as dramatic.
Right.
They're not going to get in horrible trouble, and yet they're less likely to go to harder drugs. Actually, cannabis is an exit drug. It is absolutely not an entrance drug, as we've been told.
Right.
And if you look statistically, every community, every state who goes medically, almost immediately their overdose rates drop about 25%.
Wow. Overdose on any drug.
On
Or other
just
drugs.
medicines,
Right.
pharmaceuticals.
Got you.
Or pharmaceutical overdoses.
Wow.
Because it's safer.
That's incredible. That's huge.
And that is
overdosing dropping 25%
within months of
when
legalization.
they legalize recreational or
even medical.
once they do medical, then it kind of
Anytime
seems a little
access,
a little more
safe
access to
it goes down in a state.
Wow, that is
And
amazing.
if we could save 25% of people from overdosing,
Right.
That's huge. Yeah.
that's huge.
I've been searching for more information, and like you said, when it's illegal, we can't do the studies, we can't do those things for teens, because a lot of people already, some people, I'm like, I'm not the expert, I don't know, I just want to learn more about things, and I want to have this conversation and get experts in here. But they're asking me, well, my teen has this, they've been cutting themselves, they've been doing this, is this an option, is it safe, is it going to ruin the way their brain develops? I've heard horror stories of not horror stories, but I've heard
memory.
I've heard those things, and I'm like, I want to help you find out, because I don't know either. I don't know all the answers yet. And my answer to them is like, you keep researching, and let me give you just like what I would do. I would try it myself and see how it feels and go on your heart, because right now your daughter or son is cutting themselves and they're suicidal, and you have got them on medications, you told me that, and you have them in therapy, you told me that. And do you want them alive, or do you want to just trust your heart and try and look for some other options? And I don't want to give anyone advice, and definitely we're having tons of disclaimers. This is not medical advice. This is not, like, we just want to have this conversation around here.
And it's hard because as parents, we should have the right to make those decisions, but that right's been taken from us.
Yeah.
And so then we have to, as parents, even put in a more dangerous position of choosing what we believe deep in our hearts, because I think intuitively we have a pretty good idea of what's best for us and our families, and then facing legal action.
Right, getting our kids taken away from us.
Are they going to take my child away?
Yeah.
Is he going to have to go to rehab where if the only thing he's done is cannabis, probably doesn't belong. And most of those centers just teach you how to be a better criminal and how to do other drugs.
Put them right in line with those
Opening
other
the
things.
door.
Yeah, it's
for lots
opening,
of other-
the making of criminals. And so it is a hard place to be, but I think as parents, we have to be able to be willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a gal, so as I'm searching for this, I found a few nuggets that have been really great. There's two I wanted to talk about, and people can go watch the YouTube video themselves, right? So there's Ayelet, I think her last name's Wadman. She has a book called A Really Great Day. Go look it up. It's good. She was suicidal. She had a couple kids, and she was in, I think it was like prosecuting drug and alcohol addiction, like something like that. I'll have to look to be sure, but something like that. So she knew the seriousness of things, and she ended up researching. Someone had sent her a book, psilocybin, and she got to the point where she's like, I'm not going to be here for these girls. Like, I'm so suicidal. I'm not going to be here for my kids. And this is the only option I can see right now. And she'd researched enough. She wanted to give it a try. So she documents her entire, this was many years ago, her entire microdosing. She microdoses, and she talks about the first day when she takes it and she didn't notice. You don't microdosing, you don't feel like you're high. You don't even notice it. And she's like, I didn't even know or notice or remember that I did it, but I remember working. And I looked out the window and I saw this tree and I thought how beautiful it was. And then she realized, I haven't seen beauty in nature or in anything in life in years, you know, just that little tiny thing that a lot of us take for granted, but there's tons of us, 17 million Americans, I think, major depression, that struggle with that every single day. And so she documents her entire microdosing thing. And then I watch something as I'm searching for anything on teens. And I would love if anyone has more information and studies to send me to or experiences themselves with their teens. But she speaks about that. And she says, I know my teens they're going to use it. They're going to use marijuana. They're going to, they're going to do these things. So I just make these realistic rules. I could put my blinders on and just be like, don't do drugs. Yeah. Whatever.
That works so well.
Yeah. Where I was and don't talk to me about anything and let's not have a conversation around this. Yeah. But she's just like, listen, you got to get through school. You got to get good grades. This is why. This is going to help you be successful. The best chance of success you got. And don't use it on the weekdays. You have to have your homework done. Only on weekends, and it's like, wow. I mean, someone, not that you want to ever, or I would be like, oh, she's telling them, please use this on the weekends. No, she's like, I know you're going to do it anyway, but be smart about this. Call me. Don't, if you need me to pick you up. And I thought that my kids could come to me. I was this great Mormon mom and I was open and loving and I love you no matter what. And I thought my kids could come to me and they could tell me anything and they could call me if they were in trouble. And then, they'd do something and I'd kind of freak out about it and get into this fear or shame cycle. Yep. And I wasn't trustworthy with them telling me anything. Yeah. And I find out later when I was starting to be open and find out later that one of my children got themselves into a lot of trouble and they couldn't call me. And that made it even worse because they had nowhere to go in an unsafe situation, in an unsafe state of mind. And they didn't feel like they could call me because all I would do is just get mad and guilt and shame and punish and
they already felt so
whatever and ground them forever and never let them see their friends or take the car or whatever, right? And so that wasn't an option for them. Mm-hmm. And now that I can talk to my kids about this, then they actually call me. Mm-hmm. And usually it's like, I think I'm fine. I just wanted to let you know that it's this time and we're just going to chill here for a little bit until whatever. It's not like they're super actually mindful and this is what I'm doing. And they text me and they call and they communicate. And I don't know what to tell their parents where they're like, how do you do this? And I'm like, you have to be the person. You have to have those conversations. It's not just like, I'm going to give you the lesson on drugs and you're going to call me and whatever. And we literally have the conversations about everything, about sex, about and it's not just like me talking at them. Like they talk to me about their experiences and even their friends know they can come to me and be like, I had one of my son's friends come to me and just say, I had sex with this boy and my mom and my grandma, they're gonna never let me see him again. And I'm really a little bit scared because, maybe I might get pregnant and all these things, but I really love him. And I'm like, I'm so glad I'm a person that someone can actually come and talk to. Mm-hmm. These teens need it.
It really helps change for a lot of us who, have these backgrounds of all this, anxiety and perfectionism. Mm-hmm. It really helps us relax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And really get out of that fear mindset and take a step back. And I find for me, I'm more able to treat people how I want to be treated myself because when I'm using my medicine and I'm in a good place and you come to me with something, I'm less likely to just immediately jump to that judgment. It's like, oh, wow.
It's like your ego can relax a little.
Yes. It just kind of quiets in the background, kind of takes that step back. And I find that something that we were really taught in school, I had an amazing instructor. She would say, go to the balcony. Whenever something happens or a client says something to you before your face does a thing, mentally go to the balcony. Mm-hmm. When we're up on a balcony, you can see the whole picture. Mm-hmm. And cannabis helps me stay in the balcony.
Yeah.
And be able to be like, okay, I can observe everything that's happening here. And instead of out of fear being like, oh, we're all going to die, something terrible, I'd be like, oh, you're really struggling. That's why you're being so crabby.
Yeah.
And it really, then people want to talk to us.
Right.
Because we're not just shoving all of our baggage and judgment.
Our conditioning.
All of our conditioning, because we're working on changing it.
Yeah. I love that. So it sounds like in your people coming to you, I don't know what you call it, if you're like integration or if it's life coaching or whatever that is, when I wanted to come back to this idea because I've had some amazing mentors and coaches in my life, and I've done lots and lots of work and self-work, and I think everybody should have a really good therapist or life coach.
Oh,
Everybody
absolutely.
should have that, because you get spinning in your mind and you can't figure things out, and somebody there to help you see your brain and see what you're doing in this situation is amazing. And I've come out of sessions where I'm like, that was magic. That was life changing.
A simple switch in perspective.
So amazing.
Yeah. Just being able to see something you didn't see before.
And sometimes it's 2 degrees is all you need.
Seriously, it's so good. And so if you are already doing some of these things, and maybe that's what our teens are missing, they're just doing it and they're chilling out or they're partying, and there's not this integration with a really good therapist or life coach or group or friend or whatever it is, but combined. So then I've had the years and years and years of this, and then when I have had experiences with different plants that just give you a chance to feel what it feels like to go to the balcony or feel what it feels like to open your heart to this deep love with some of the heart opening, what are they, just a heart opening medicine, or these different things, and you're able to experience that to the depths of your soul, this joy or this connection with another human, whether it's your teenager you're so angry at because they won't do any chores and they're not, and you're just resentful or whatever that is, and then you open your heart and you see them differently and you experience what they're going through, and then you combine that with this integration or life coaching or therapy, and your world changes. Like, I know this human experience, we're meant to have some struggles. And somebody's going to hit you with the car, and you're going to have to make the best out of it. And why are we holding ourselves in, like, there's so much unnecessary. There's things that are going to happen. And yet, I don't know what percentage, I'm going to make up a dumb number, but 80% of these terrible things we're keeping ourselves in, we're causing ourselves to do. And if we can
let it go,
see what it feels, and then sometimes you don't even need that medicine or that plant or that whatever, because you learned how it feels, and you can just tap into that, how it feels like, oh yeah, I'm not in the balcony, or I need to get into my heart and I need to breathe a minute, and then I can see this human being or child or spouse that's driving me crazy in front of me as they really are. And I can be who I really am. I can tap into that, and it changes your life. I'm just
and to be able to be a part of that for people, because I've always felt like I had a sign on my forehead that said, tell me your life story. I came like that, so I was like, well, okay, I need to go into counseling. And, going through that and really learning, and it was amazing. I learned how to deal with relationships in my life that were not necessarily healthy, put up boundaries and not ignore things. It's a typical conditioning that we have. It happens a lot in alcoholic families, but also has in religious families. That whole, doesn't matter if the elephant shits in the room, we do not speak of it.
Pretend it didn't happen.
Because there has to be this persona that the world sees. And with my kids and stuff, it's really fun because they work in the industry. My entire family works in CBD industry in Utah. To watch them go from, my mother-in-law said it best. She said to my husband, he's been smoking since 12, 13. She says, isn't it just beautiful that your naughtiness turned into a career? And isn't it beautiful that now we can have coaches who you can say, well, so I think I need cannabis. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Could you go to your therapist 10 years ago and be like, so I smoked some weed and I feel amazing and I had this connective that would have been acceptable.
Right.
So let's normalize that. Yeah. Let's have those conversations.
Right. I wanted to ask one other thing, Heidi. This is jumping around a little bit, but now let's say just a hypothetical situation, one of your kids or stepkids is struggling like with alcohol and is in a really bad place. But how now might you handle that? Like, instead of shaming and guilting and freaking out, and how do you treat that person?
It's just from love. I mean, so much love. Like you were talking earlier, I am in such a better place to be able to look and not see just the addiction and be angry and be bitter and think he's a terrible person. Like, seeing his heart and knowing his heart, you know, instead of just, what a piece of shit, he can't get his life in order. Like, it's just such a shift. It's just a acceptance and love, and not a guilt, shame, and fear and judge. So grateful that he called. He felt, you know, that he could call me to come pick him up. But yes, the old me would have just guilted the shit out of him. You know, how dare you? You're here visiting me for 2 weeks and you go out and get drunk and do stupid shit and all the things. You know, I would have just guilted the shit out of him. And so yeah, I picked him up, let him talk. I was quiet and let him do his drunk ramble. Got him in to lay down because he was feeling sick. And just took a moment where I just, to myself, and put my hand on my heart and really thought, what does he need from me in this moment? Because I already know that he feels bad about the situation. Like, belittling him and shaming him isn't going to make him feel any better. It's not going to make it better.
It's not going to make him change either.
No, it's not going to change anything.
I think he's going to stop because we belittle and shame him.
So to be able to, just be heart-centered and ask my true self and not my ego, what does he need from me right now? It was no words. I mean, that came through so clearly. No words. He just needs you to love him. So I sat with him for 2 hours and we didn't talk. And I just rubbed his back and held his head while he puked and, made sure he was alive and safe. But there was no need for conversation at that time. And
definitely no need for a lecture.
No lecture. And I mean, even the next day, this child has a difficult time expressing love and affection. Like, it's almost it's just not there. The next day he was sitting on the couch by me watching TV, and a few minutes, he scoots a little bit closer and I'm like, okay, like, I'm good with it. I just, like, if I say anything, he's going to be out of there. So he's laying down and he's putting his head in my lap, and I'm like, inside, I'm like, oh yes. But, like, just how it can affect a relationship had I been in that mode of guilting and shaming. It would have been terrible. And driven us even further apart.
And you connected.
It was a beautiful moment. So grateful for it.
So I'm going to have a guest on. It's a mom, and she was on Ambien. And, well, her husband cheated on her. That's the beginning of the story. And she was on Ambien, and she wasn't sleeping for some weird reason, not that her whole life was falling apart, right? She'll tell the long story, but she ended up going to heroin. Heroin helped her sleep. Interesting, huh? So from Ambien was the gateway drug to heroin. Wow. Ambien was terrible also, by the way. Oh. Look into Ambien because it's
a scary show.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, heroin. She'd gone through rehab twice. She has young kids. What got her off of it was cannabis and mushrooms. Mushrooms helped pull her out to see she wasn't a terrible person, and, like, just pull her out of that hole and see the beauty of life and her kids and all of this. Cannabis helped her sleep. It helped her anxiety. But the combination of those two things saved her. These things can help with some of the harder,
Absolutely.
Like with your drug and alcohol addiction things, people that are...
There's in California and up north, there is a center using cannabis. And in California, there are some treatment centers using mushrooms and cannabis in conjunction because for some, like alcohol, you have a cellular reaction to it. Your whole body's screaming for more of it. It can be very painful, and it can also be deadly coming off of a lot of drugs. And the pain and the detox and the mindset and forgiveness. A lot of people who are deep into addictions, they feel guilty. We shame them all we want, but anything that you can say to them, they've said 10 times worse to themselves. And so there's a lot of guilt. Like, you know what? We're all humans. We're all trying to figure this out. how lucky are we that we have this beautiful flower and these beautiful psilocybins that are there to help us.
Yeah.
I love it. So I think it'll be really fun in the classes, and the groups and the communities will be able to go there. If you could just tell everyone in the world this one thing for them to know.
Get educated. If you don't know, talk to me, talk to people. Look, we have groups on Facebook and Instagram. Get educated. Don't just assume that everything that you've been told is true, because there are a lot of nuances in the information that we've been given. And there is a lot of scientific evidence that can help educate you. If you're scared for your kids, get educated. Yes. If you need help, get educated. I think for me, that's why I started with being certified. I had a lot of education, but there's a weight to having that certification. Yeah. And reach out. Don't be afraid to have the conversation, you know. And if you don't have someone in your life to talk to, contact us. We'll talk to you. Because everything that you think you know, I sat in some science classes and have had my mind just blown, and I'm fairly educated. So there's always more to learn, and there's more studies coming out. And the more that we get our anecdotal evidence together and we talk about it, the more we'll be able to help other people.
I was just curious, like, okay, so what is the big difference between like a vape pen versus smoking flower? Is one better than the other?
Personally, I prefer flower because it is a Mother Nature created this magic. Right? Yeah. And there are nuances in that plant that we can't synthesize, nor do we even know what to test for. When you have a vape pen, they take all of this flower and they decarboxylate it, which is they activate it. They take it from an acidic and it brings it back to a base. Then it goes into a distillation process where they remove the oil from the plant matter. Then they clean that up, and then depending on the company, some companies are re-adding the terps. Terpenes are really important. They help with the flavor, but there's also this amazing entourage effect, and different terpenes affect us in different ways. So for certain things, like osmine is a very low level terpene, but it is this little happy terpene. So it's been processed. So for the best in medicine, I prefer flower. And again, make sure you have clean COAs. And there's nothing, but there's also convenience.
Or the other that's better on your lungs?
Yeah, I wonder about
so they recommend dry herb vaping rather than smoking.
Okay. Dry herb vaping. So that's like some kind of a contraption that you put your dry.
Yes.
Okay.
It's more like a little oven. I've got a couple of links to some good ones. I've had some bad ones, but I also think, you know, if you're doing it for serious medicine, it does not have the carcinogens. It is a bronchodilator, which means the smoke from the flower itself will open up your lungs. So it's a dilator. So there's no research that says that it's super terrible. A lot of the oils, if you're doing a lot of concentrated, you know, we don't necessarily want oil in our lungs. So there's a balance there. And also knowing your body. If you're going through a vape pen a day, probably that's not good for you.
Yeah.
And that's a lot for your lungs. So I think that full plant medicine absolutely is where it is. You know, once we start extracting single cannabinoids or saying, oh, this one's so much better because of, it's not necessarily true, because they all have this rainbow effect of things that they do. Yes.
Legally, I think you can have like 0.02 or something. Am I
0.03?
Right? 0.03 of THC in a CBD, and it's legal. Yes. And is that enough
for some people? So that's where, you know, dosing is for new people who have never used. Dosing is something that you got to start really low and slow, and go for a few days, and CBD too, to find the right dose, because you can take really high doses and you may feel better, but it might be burning out your cannabinoids. If you have too many cannabinoids in your system, then your cannabinoid receptors will go down too small. They can for some people. And so there's a lot of nuance involved in it. That's why it's really hard. That's why education is important, because this is not Vicodin. You aren't just gonna, here's one pill that will save all. Yeah. It's really unique to our own biology.
Love it. Thank you so much. I learned a ton.
Thank you.
And that was super fun.
Thanks so much for subscribing and leaving a review. Come join our amazing free community, Life Changing Trips. There's a link in the description. All content is for informational, entertainment, educational, and harm reduction purposes only. Life-Changing Trips and Harmony Williams and their affiliates and guests are not doctors or mental health professionals or legal advisors. Any information shared is not meant to treat, diagnose, or claim cures for any physical conditions or mental illness. Psychedelics and sacred plant medicines are not for everyone, even when done legally. There are serious contraindications with various health conditions and pharmaceutical medications. Please do your own research and take action to be informed. Remember that you are 100% responsible for your actions and subsequent consequences. The views of the guests are not the views and opinions of Life Changing Trips.